all these kids. It was just overwhelming to see their hungry little eyes. It was just overwhelming. And this little girl came and put her head on my knee. And I picked her up and I sang her the lullaby that my mother used to sing to me. And she fell asleep in my arms, and I went to put her in her room, and I walked into her room and I found these wooden beds. And Corey, putting an orphan baby on a wooden bed on Mother's Day changed me. It changed me. I thought, somebody better help these children.
Yeah.
And I guess it better be me, because if it's not me, who's going to do it? And so, I literally started the Miracle Foundation that day, that Mother's Day, 21 years ago, because I just knew that they were miracles, that they were this had so much potential, and just given a foundation, like I had a foundation, that they could reach their full potential. And that's really what Miracle Foundation is all about.
If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've heard me and Josh talk about MWI, which is our digital marketing agency. If you're new around here, this may be a first introduction to MWI. We're a full-service digital marketing agency that specializes in everything from website design and development to search engine optimization and all forms of paid advertising, whether it's paid social advertising or paid search advertising, content marketing, digital PR, social media management. Basically anything a business needs to strengthen and grow their digital footprint is what we do over at MWI. The website is mwi.com. And for any listeners of the Hope Strategy podcast, I'd love to offer a free 20-minute consultation with yours truly to talk about your business, to talk about your goals, to understand, what you need to be doing from a digital marketing strategy and action plan standpoint in order to yield some results and grow your business online. So please reach out at mwi.com/hope strategy. That's mwi.com/hope strategy to sign up, and we will be in touch. Now back to the show. Welcome to a new episode of the Hope Strategy Podcast, the special week where we are speaking with those participants, members, those in association with the Orphan Myth campaign. It has been such an eye-opening week of interviews, and couldn't be more thrilled to be a part of the Orphan Myth Project. Go to orphanmyth.org to learn more and listen to all of these episodes if you want to be enlightened and really understand a problem that we can all definitely play a role and have an impact on, which is helping reunite foster kids with their families and helping foster kids find families outside of their own, families if reunification isn't an option, but really just finding forever families for orphans in the United States and throughout the world. Today's conversation is with Caroline Boudreaux, and she's the founder of the Miracle Foundation. She's a social entrepreneur who founded the Miracle Foundation in the year 2000. We talk about the genesis of the Miracle Foundation when she was on a trip to travel the world with one of her close friends. And I'm not going to spoil it now, but really just had this amazing experience where she saw an orphanage in India and realized that there was so much work that needed to be done. And at that point, she dedicated her life to this cause and has done incredible work. So inspiring. She is a firecracker Cajun who was born and raised in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and attended Louisiana State University, where she earned a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. Prior to her nonprofit work, she had a successful career in media advertising. One of the great things about this podcast, about any podcast that you listen to, one of the reasons people are so drawn to them is because you get to hear insights on a lot of different subject matter from experts. And that's how I felt as I spoke with Caroline. We discussed her expertise on what it means to really tackle a big problem head on and do so with really big ambition and optimism and hard work. She has changed the lives of thousands and thousands of kids throughout the world, especially in India, where she has done so much humanitarian work. She's won so many awards: the Hope Award, the Impact Award, and the United Nations Humanitarian Award. She speaks all over the place, and it really is just an absolute powerhouse. And it was such an honor to talk with her. And I'm excited for everybody to hear and continue to learn, just as I did for the hour that I had a chance to speak with her. Please enjoy this conversation with Caroline Boudreaux.
Something is happening in our world.
Time is very precious. I'm going to show you how great I am.
Hope in the face
face of difficulty.
More than machinery, we need humanity.
Hope in the face of uncertainty. I'm better now than I was. I'm experienced now.
Changing the world can happen anywhere, and anyone can do it.
The audacity of hope.
This is the Hope Strategy Podcast with Corey Blake and Josh Steinley. I am so excited to talk to you. You are such an accomplished person. And as I watched and listened to videos and interviews and TEDx talks and all the different cool things that you've done and read about you, it's so inspiring to see the journey of personal development and personal growth and professional growth that you were seeing early on. And then how it seems that you were kind of blindsided and just ran into this huge issue that you didn't know anything about, which we'll get to, this orphanage that you came across in India. And I want to hear about why you were in India in the first place. So we'll talk about all this. And then now that was 2000. That was a long time ago. That was 21 years ago at this point. And now you've dedicated your life professionally and personally and spiritually and every other way, I'm guessing, to this cause that you have been behind and grown. And it's so incredible. So I can't wait for everybody to hear about it. That all being said, and we'll dangle a little carrot there. I want to go back in time and hear about life for you before the foundation, and how as you've had a chance to kind of look back on your journey, what was your upbringing like, and what kind of things do you see that you learned or developed as a young person that helped you then in time kind of gravitate towards this type of work?
Corey, I was one of the lucky ones. I came from a small Catholic family. It was just the 9 of us. And we had a ton of love and a ton of family. And it was a very functional, loving family. My parents loved each other. And we all grew up to be very good friends, and I had wonderful grandparents. I just don't have, I was so lucky, and I knew that I was lucky. I had a mom who was a social worker. My father was a pharmacist, and it was just a really good, wonderful Cajun upbringing.
Yeah.
French Cajun upbringing, Mardi Gras, and, all the Catholic ceremonies, etc. So it was a really great childhood. Graduated from, high school, and then went to college. I graduated with a degree in psychology, and then came to Austin, Texas, and started my career. I started my career in television. I was with some friends, and we started a TV station together. They literally wired the satellite on top. Oh, really? Yes.
You didn't go get a job at one. You started it.
Well, yeah. I got a job with these 2 people that were, they were engineers, and so they needed someone to really come in and do some sales and marketing for them. And so I started doing that, and I worked on trade, and I got some, it was just like this really kind of entrepreneurial venture. Yeah. And then we got bought by another TV station, and then that TV station got bought by another TV station, and I stayed with them the whole time, and it just kept getting more and more corporate, less and less entrepreneurial. And so, like you do in Austin, Texas, one of my friends and I went to happy hour one night, had a margarita, and we decided that we were going to quit our jobs and take a trip around the world for a year. The goal was to chase summer for 1 full year.
Wow.
So we went back to her house, spread this map on the floor, and started picking the countries that we wanted to see on this trip around the world. She wanted to go to India because she'd been sponsoring a little boy there, and she wanted to go meet him.
Sponsoring, like doing one of the programs where you can send some
money, $35 a month. And, they were supposed to be providing clean water, education, and free primary clean water, electric power, and free primary education. And I didn't believe it for a second.
Yeah.
I thought it was a scam. And she grabs the picture. She's like, this is him. Isn't he so cute? I was like, yeah, he's cute, Chris, but they give everybody the same picture. It's how many people have a picture of that kid? So, but she insisted, she really wanted to go meet him. And so we started our trip in January of 2000, worked our way up Africa, got to India in May, and went to this very remote village, 45 minutes off a paved road in the state of Odisha.
Have you traveled internationally like that before?
Oh, yeah. I had both. We had both traveled extensively, but we had seen a lot of Europe, but we wanted to see what we were calling the real world.
Well, yeah, there's a difference between traveling to Europe or traveling to a resort somewhere to traveling to India and getting on a dirt road and heading out to the middle
Egypt and South Africa and, Afghanistan. I mean, we wanted to see what you couldn't really see on with 2 weeks off on, with a corporate job. We wanted to see what you normally don't get to see. And so, which we did. Boy, did we see what you don't normally get to see. So we had this, we went to this village. We met the little boy. We got paraded through his village. And at the end of this parade.
So he was real. The little boy in the end was there and he was real.
Holding the first picture she had ever sent.
Oh, really? Oh, that's so sweet.
Clean water, free education, and electric power. Everything they promised that they were going to help this kid with, they were helping him with. I was shocked. I was shocked. And so we started doing volunteer work in the village every day. We didn't know what to do, but we were just building them swings and stuff. It was 119 degrees. So, we wanted to chase summer. We found it.
Yeah.
And one day, the social worker invited us to his house for dinner. And it was the day that changed my life because I got up early in the morning. It was Mother's Day in the United States. Got up early in the morning, called my mom for Mother's Day, went and worked in the village all day in 119 degree heat, and then went to this guy's house and walked into his orphanage.
He lived in the orphanage.
He lived and worked in an orphanage. And, for me, just the bottom fell out because I thought the whole time I was in that village that I was working with the bottom of the pyramid. I thought that those were the poorest people. But what I learned was that really, poor is when no one loves you. So we had dinner with these beautiful children. We had dinner. We had a chicken. They had rice. We had this prayer service with them. And then after dinner, we were holding them and playing with them. And they were they were like Velcro. I mean, just attached to us. All these kids, it was just overwhelming to see their empty little eyes, their hungry little eyes. It was just overwhelming. And this little girl came and put her head on my knee, and I picked her up and I sang her the lullaby that my mother used to sing to me. And she fell asleep in my arms, and I went to put her in her room, and I walked into her room and I found these wooden beds. And Corey, putting an orphan baby on a wooden bed on Mother's Day changed me. It changed me. I thought, somebody better help these children.
Yeah.
And I guess it better be me, because if it's not me, who's going to do it? And so, I literally started the Miracle Foundation that day, that Mother's Day, 21 years ago, because I just knew that they were miracles, that they were this had so much potential, and just given a foundation, like I had a foundation, that they could reach their full potential. And that's really what Miracle Foundation is all about.
Again, just like we said at the top of the episode, a lot of the most meaningful organizations or causes or businesses come when you least expect it, or in a way that it's just like, oh, there is a need here, and I can't turn a blind eye to this anymore. You say that you started it that day. Did you immediately start planning? And did you start there in India with that group? I mean, what was the process like for you? Sounds like you already had been kind of an entrepreneurial minded person. Is that something you always did? Were you always an entrepreneur in that way?
I'm an out of the box thinker. I like to solve problems. But when I say I started it that day, it was just from that day on, I have been haunted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the smack of reality the way you put it is so powerful and emotional to say, to lay down an orphan on a wooden bed. And again, the thing that I've learned over and over and over again in these conversations with the orphan myth, people associated with the orphan myth that we've talked to, is that as much as we can humanize this issue and really, and there's been so many ways that they're doing that, right? Whether it's just through showing pictures or video recording these foster kids in the US or elsewhere in the world, because it's easy for us to see the numbers and hear the statistics and then say, well, that doesn't seem like anything. There's not much I can do about it sitting here in my house in Gilbert, Arizona. It just seems too far away. And not everybody's going to pack up and leave for a year to go see the world and go be confronted with these things face to face. So the best, as much as we can get these stories in front of people, the more, you can kind of lean on that participation and see things change and evolve. So tell me about the Miracle Fest. That was 21 years ago. Tell me about the evolution since then. I mean, what have you guys been doing, and what's the work looked like as you've grown?
Well, so, I told you I was in television, and the reason our little TV station, we joke, we had this little TV station in Austin, Texas, and we had, like 6 viewers. I mean, all 6 of our viewers really liked what we were doing.
Yeah.
We didn't have a whole lot of viewership. It was a tiny little TV station, but the reason we existed was because I was selling advertising to these franchises. So you'd sell to one person and they'd have 40 Taco Bells or 30 Whataburgers. And so I started going to a bunch of different orphanages in India to see what the problems were. And I thought, well, where are the systems? I mean, they all need the same thing. Every kid needs a clean water, electric power, education. They have, they need to be protected from abuse and neglect. They need to have their rights met. And so let's put a system together, like an operating system, like a franchise methodology, and go into existing orphanages and raise the standard of care. And so that's what we did. We based it on the rights of the child, and we would go into existing orphanages and take a measurement of how they were doing of meeting the rights of the child, and then work with them every single month to raise the standards of care for all kids in their orphanage. And we did that with 300 orphanages and 15,000 children. And it was just this great, this nice growth. It was all just this really great thing. And then the orphan myth happened. And the orphan myth is when you learn that these children have families.
Yeah.
And number one. Number two, they don't want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
As good as an orphanage can be, they don't want to be there. They want to grow up with a family. They want to make a difference. They want their opinion to matter. When they get sick, they don't want to be in a dorm room taking care of themselves. They want to be in their mom's bed getting the kind of food that they want when they have a stomachache. Mm-hmm. So when we started hearing from the children that they didn't really want to be there, and they had an aunt or a cousin or a grandmother that would take them if given some support, it changed everything for us. And so we learned that it was really a myth that these children weren't orphans. And so we started transitioning children from orphanages into families. And like we do with everything, we got a methodology. We have a way to measure. It's all on an app. The social workers can measure how is a child's family, how are they going to raise the money, how are they going to educate the kids, how are they going to take care of the mental health and well-being of these children, of this child. And then we get them back into the family. So that's what Miracle Foundation does too. We empower children to reach their full potential by giving them a family.
So you systematize this whole thing, right? And it's the Thrive scale, right? That's right. The method. And you use the UN's 12. What is it? The 12. What is it?
The 12 rights of the child. So in 1989, the United Nations came together and said all kids on all continents have the same fundamental rights. It's a beautiful document, and we've all agreed all kids have the right to a stable, loving, nurturing environment. They have the right to live with their parents if possible. They have the right to clean water. They have the right to nutrition and healthcare and education. They have the right to be heard and participate in decisions that affect them. They have the right to be protected from abuse and neglect. And so we are a rights-based organization. Everything we do is to measure and activate rights of children.
And so it started with going into these orphanages, specifically in India, and measuring them, stacking them up against using this scale and saying, okay, they're doing well in the protection from abuse. That seems to be really good, but they're not being heard and participating much in anything or whatever, right? So you kind of map it out. And then from there, you would create strategies and help consult or train them on how to be better. Is that the idea?
Yeah, you train them or the children. So if the kids have the right to be heard and participate in decisions that affect them, you would train the children on how to participate in decisions that affect them. So, life skill education. Yeah. So we would work with these orphanages every single month. Well, and this is to work with the children. The children are the ones that make everything happen.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. Like you said, this is where you again kind of ran into this wall, which it was that myth as you became more educated, meaning the idea initially was, let's make these orphanages the best orphanages that could possibly ever exist, and these kids will be good. And then when you start, and the statistics I've heard, where I think it's 80+% of orphans or foster kids have I think it's the parent that I think, the parent being the first idea, one of the parents or both of the parents being the ideal situation to go reunify them with their parents and help them, build a nurturing family. But if they aren't there and the parents truly are struggling with some sort of abuse, drug abuse, or, are living on the streets or something, they typically have an aunt or an uncle or a cousin or somebody. And the numbers are astounding at how much opportunity there is to reunify. So did you shift? It sounds like everything was in India. Are you still only in India working with the Miracle Foundation?
No, we do work with foster kids in the United States, trying to keep them stable. But most of our work today is definitely in India, and we're transitioning children. And the secret about most of the kids, they might have a family member, and 80% of them definitely have a parent. But just ask the children, who can you live with? Who would you like to live with? And they know. So it's the children who participate in that decision. And
so it's similar with 1 Million Home. Do you know Mike Gallagher?
Definitely. Absolutely.
So again, when I talked with him, it was the idea was, and the model that they have is to say, instead of having they literally use a diagram where it's like, instead of having just the front door to an orphanage, you now have the front door and then the back door as well, where we're kind of constantly, ideally getting to the point where there's nobody in the orphanage because they've gone out the back door and found family and everything. So is that how you've kind of continued to shift to where now the work has gone from not only creating a great experience at the orphanage itself, but is there, what types of things are you doing to help reunify?
That's a beautiful model. But what the way we shifted is definitely the back door, transitioning children and ensuring they thrive. So ensuring that they thrive, whether they're in an orphanage or in a family, that's definitely part of our core goal. But the second goal is to prevent them from entering the system in the first place. And that is where our work has really taken us. The example is, if you're walking on the street and you're walking by a river and you see a baby drowning in the river, you're going to jump in and save that baby. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But then you see another baby drowning in the river and you save that baby, and you start saving all these babies in the river, and we get so busy saving the babies that we never look up on the bridge and see the guy throwing the babies into the river. So that is the work. That's the work. You hear about systems change. When you hear systems change, what you want to hear is you want to hear root cause. Why are these children entering the system in the first place? What's happening to ensure to get them into the system? So there's really 4 things that need to happen to keep kids out of the system. Number 1, we have to have data. We have great data here in the United States, but globally the data is missing. Like, why are they in these institutions? Why are they being separated in the first place? So data is critical. The second thing that has to change is our approach. Separating children because their parents are poor, separating children just because one of their parents has a drug addiction. There are other places to put children other than the foster care system or in an orphanage. There's lots of relatives people can go with. Kinship care is our big push. So we have to change the approach. You have to change the narrative. That's what we're talking about with the orphan myth. We're changing the narrative. We do not need orphanages. This is a solvable problem. People will take these children. You don't need this anymore. So we've got to change the narrative. And then lastly, we have to build community programs. We have to help the community build programs to prevent children from entering the system that long before they need formal support, there's a neighbor or somebody there to help the family stay together. So that's the name of the game.
Yeah. And it's one of the myths in the Orphan Myth campaign is, I think it's the third one, is that it's too big of a problem to solve. And you've been working on this for 21 years and with your foundation, and with the goal to end orphanages but in your lifetime.
That's right. That's it.
What progress have you seen? I'm sure it's a ton. That's a very broad question, but for the naysayer out there, for the skeptic that hears these conversations and says, this is too big of a problem. This has existed since the beginning of time. I mean, what are some of the huge benchmarks that you guys have seen as you've grown over the last 21 years that have made an impact?
64% of children that live in orphanages in India went home during COVID.
Wow.
64%. So, in India, they have this saying, never let a good tragedy go to waste. Yeah. So, that's what's happening. So we see humongous progress. And, for people that say it's too big of a problem, that's what they used to say about hunger. back in the 70s when 40,000 people a day died of starvation. Today, it's somewhere around 3,500. And we've added 2 billion people to the planet. You know, in the 90s, in the early 90s, AIDS was going to wipe out the planet. It was the bubonic plague of our time. And look, we've curbed it. So I know we got a lot of bad news out there. I know there's a lot of bad press and everything, you know, but we have made progress. I mean, there are not as many hungry people. There's a lot more. There's 30 million more people with clean water this year than last year. So, I mean, we're making progress. We just don't get to hear about it as much.
I know. And that's a shame. We got to figure out. That's one of the things that always comes up on this podcast is like, how do we switch that? How do we change the narrative that we hear on a daily basis?
The narrative. Like, we can do this.
Yeah.
Come on. We have someone on Mars.
Seriously.
And you know what? Corey, the thing is, we used to depend on churches to do things. We used to depend on governments to do things. We used to depend on the system, the capital market system we used to be able to depend on. Now we can't really depend on those things. The only thing we can depend upon are like-minded actors acting. And that is another thing that's so powerful about the orphan myth is look, 1 Million Home and Lindsay Hadley and all these organizations that are coming together to change this system for children. It's really working. I mean, it's like all these different nonprofit organizations working together in unison to say, we're not going to take it. We're going to take a stand for kids. We're going to make sure they have a family for every child. It's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. It's rather than having the state do their thing and these churches do their things and these organizations that are helping here and this organization there that's helping there. I love, as I've had these conversations and explored this whole campaign, to see the way that people are coming together in order to, for the greater good, and to finally kind of systematize and organize this in a way that everybody can get involved and everybody can participate. And as a result, we can see real, change and really, really move the needle. One of the questions I had as I was doing some research on this, because not only have you been doing all of this incredible stuff for 21 years, but you've done it since 2000, and the way that the world has changed since 2000. I mean, the amount of innovation and technologies and the internet and things that we've seen in the last 20 years is incredible. And so as a social entrepreneur, I actually taught social entrepreneurship at a university for a few years. And everything that we talked about, well, maybe it's just because I was looking at it through a digital marketing lens, but pretty much everything we talked about was online. The way, and obviously getting there and getting your hands dirty and going and being there and supporting and, whatever cause you're working on. But how has that changed the game for you as you guys have been so data being the number one of the 4 things, obviously technology and the internet and all the tools we have and stuff has made that. I mean, being running this since the early 2000s, how has that continued to evolve and change and bless your organization? Yeah,
the power of technology is the ability to scale. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is the hardest part of a nonprofit. So you can have someone like me, you can have someone like a Mike Gallagher who lives it, eats it, breathes it. I mean, this is like our whole life. We're totally consumed with it. And that's awesome in that we're really great at affecting the little, things that we can touch. But technology allows us to be able to scale that and really put the case management tool in the hands of social workers across India. So we have 2,300 case managers and government officials using our Thrive Scale. It's an app, it's on their phone, it's a case management system. They can make sure the kids are happy. I could never do that. I could never, but that is the power of technology, is you can put these apps in people's hands and give them the tools they need to do a great job.
Well, I mean, just to put it into perspective, if you go back in time to 2001 or 2002, when you were living in the US, working to get this thing off the ground and going back and forth, I mean, just think of what a day in the life was then in order to communicate versus what it is today. Yeah, Corey. I mean, I had to take my Discman off my ears, Yeah. I traveled around the world with a Discman and a 35 millimeter camera. So, I mean, it's different. It's a different animal today. Well, even just the communication of having to buy an international calling card in order to make, and pay a bunch of money to call over there to see how things were going. I'm guessing that was just kind of the way it was, right? Just the way it was. Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. And now I even think back to, I spent some time in Guatemala in the early 2000s, and And I remember like the idea of contacting my family who was still in the States, or then once I came back from Guatemala, like the thought of getting in touch with them was like, how do I don't know their numbers and I have to spend all the money to get the car. And that was just down to Guatemala. It wasn't India.
Yeah,
of the world.
I know.
And now it's like, I just get yeah. And now I just get like a Facebook message at all, any hour from anybody in any part of the world. And we have a team in Hong Kong, and it's seamless. It's incredible.
It is.
But, and so it's interesting. This is kind of going on a tangent, but it's an interesting one. So oftentimes when you're talking about technology, there are a lot of negative connotations with the way that we use it or how everybody's addicted to it or whatever. But you're a great example of an organization that's doing good and can do it so much faster and so much more organized and allowing data to drive decision making, which really is not just making somebody money, but is changing lives so much faster. The efficiency and like you said, scale that we're able to build things out at because of the internet for causes like this is incredible.
It's amazing. I mean, that really is the difference, because it's one thing for us to have the data, but it's another thing to be able to have shared data so other organizations and the government can have the shared data. So that is the magic of it. Absolutely.
So what's your relationship like? I mean, what are some of the organizations that you work with now in India or elsewhere in the world? I know that you've worked with the United Nations, right? And UNICEF. And so what are some of these partnerships that you have, and how are some of these collaborations? How have they come to be, and how have they made a difference as you guys have continued to grow the foundation?
Yeah, the power of doing everything around the rights of the child. So the Convention on the Rights of the Child, like I said, was ratified in 1989 and ratified by 183 countries. Everything we do is based off those rights. So if you're working in those rights, then you are automatically following the rule of law in a country, because the country's taken that document and made it their law. So because of that, we've partnered really with the government. We partner with UNICEF. Of course, we partner with the UN, but we partner with state, district, and village government level officials to train their social workforce so that, like I said, we have to change that approach. Yeah. So training the social workforce on how to approach these problems. So instead of saying, look, the dad's an alcoholic, get the kid out of there. Dad's an alcoholic. Is there something you can do to help the mother support the child and stay there? Or is there an aunt that the kid can go to? Or is there a grandmother that child can go to? So being able to be on the ground with those social workers and empowering the social workforce is part of the magic of the work that we do.
So I was going to ask, I spoke earlier today with Leanne Tui, and we were talking, about all of this, and I had it on my notes to ask her this question, and I didn't. So I'm passing the question on to you because I'm curious about the conversation. When we talk about, well, I'll use her as an example, and this is why I was going to bring it up. Her son that everybody knows about from The Blind Side, her adopted son, Michael Orr, recently, I mean, like maybe a day or two before I even found out that we were going to communicate, that I was going to have her on the podcast, her son had made a statement about how he, to this day, now that he's gone, I mean, he went on to win Super Bowls, and he's, been this incredible athlete, and he has this incredible story that he's so grateful for, and he's always so gracious and stuff. But he has talked about the mental health struggles that he's had as he's had to deal and cope with this, with his traumatic upbringing, with the fact that before he met this family and before he was brought into this home and felt that love and stuff, he had seen and heard and, whatever, some terrible things being in that system, being in a broken home. What have you seen, or, I mean, have you guys studied that a lot, kind of the mental health, both currently with these foster kids or orphans,
definitely,
as well as the plans for them as they get older? Because all of us have things from our childhood that are traumatic in one way or another, but usually, for those of us that are fortunate, they're minor compared to somebody that, like you said, is in India, that's growing up on the streets, that gets pulled into an orphanage where these 12 needs are not being met. And sometimes in terrible, terrible ways, not just sort of, Talk to me about kind of the way that mental health plays into this and how we help there.
I love that question. That's so vitally important. And it's really why we deal in prevention, because you could just argue the minute you enter the system, that means a social worker comes to your house, you're removed, the damage is done. Mm-hmm. You cannot take even a guy like Michael, or you can't take a guy like that, take them out of their family, put them in a different environment and think you're dealing with the same person. It fundamentally changes who you are and the value. We've seen that just over and over and over again. So the secret is to support a family long before any kind of formal interventions are necessary. That is the secret to prevention, long before the interventions are necessary. That's what the magic is. You got to do that. And then, of course, children that don't have that option, children that have moved, children that have moved from home to home to home, which is very, very common, they have to have some counseling. They have to have there's all this amazing work being done. There's trauma counseling. There's lots of trauma-informed care, lots of great research on that, but the children definitely need mental health. And we do that on their phone through COVID. So kids have a phone, they have a tablet or a phone, and we're doing their mental health counseling on the phone with them. So you got to have mental health counseling. There's no doubt about it. You're not dealing with the same person. I will tell you though, here's the other kind of flip side of that. We call them OPCs, other people's children. What we allow for other people's children is not what we would ever allow for our own. And, I hope your listeners are thinking to themselves, what can I do? It's too big. If the system's too big and the problem's too big, it's like, what can I do? We all ultimately want three things. Everybody wants three things. We want to love and be loved. We want our families to be healthy, happy, and taken care of. And we want to make a difference. And this is the opportunity to really make a difference for somebody. And whether that's paying for their mental health counseling, whether that's supporting a nonprofit organization that's supporting mothers, anything like that you can do, volunteer, get the message out, share stuff on social media, anything that people can do to move the needle, it's just going to make us all just go a lot faster. So if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that is how we can really, really make a big impact for these kids, because they need us. And we wouldn't let our own kids deal with what these kids deal with for a minute. So we need to start acting like they're our children. All children are our children, and really start supporting them. Yeah.
That's very powerful. I love that. And we'll assume that anybody listening to this episode hasn't heard the other ones. Go listen to all the other go to orphanmyth.org. And if you scroll down a little bit, there's this, a place where you can go to get involved with this 100% participation campaign, which the idea is any organization you're involved with, whether it's your team at work or your sports team or your, faith group or whatever, your book club, whatever, is to get as many of these different organizations and groups involved to say, let's contribute and let's get 100% of us in this group to donate, to contribute in some way. It's not to say that you have to become a foster parent overnight. It's not to say that you better, get on your, the adoption list immediately. It's to say, what can you do to fill your cup a little bit, to help this cause, to help, push the needle, even if it's just a teeny bit. And if 100% of people did that, then the problem would be solved pretty quick.
It wouldn't be heavy. Yeah. Nothing's heavy if everyone lifts. And right now it's pretty heavy.
Lift where you stand, right?
Yeah.
So I want to ask about, and I, right at the beginning of the episode, you talked about your family and you said, I'm one of the lucky ones. And you talked about growing up in this nuclear family with your dad and your mom and your siblings and your family close by, and, your faith there that was, why, as you've traveled the world, as you've seen these problems in the worst of these problems, with this crisis, with the orphans and foster kids and all of this work that you've done, and this again, another big question, why is the family so important? What conclusions have you drawn as to why family is so critical and important?
When you talk to kids that have been placed in foster care, or when I talk to people that have been raised in adoption, they talk about that missing piece, and a lot of times with adoption and foster care and orphan care, we're not looking at chemistry. So we're saying, I know you're an athlete, but we're going to put you in this house with a bunch of musicians. Or I know you're an introvert, but we're going to just put you in this house with a bunch of extroverts. We're going to put you around. I heard one kid said, I've never heard anybody laugh like me. And it's like these things that you share with your family, a very, and it happened with my husband. My family has this really strong sense of humor, this this kind of this sense of humor that's very much, Cajun. It's very much our sense of humor. And my husband came in, he's just never heard that kind of sense of humor before. He's never been around that kind of laughter before. And it's like, that's what happens to kids. It's like, it's not really theirs. It's not really, they don't really grow up with that. So nothing's important. Nothing's as important to a kid as a family. And if you don't believe me, just ask them. Just ask them.
I'm not adopted, but I have a similar story, and people who have listened to the podcast have heard this, but my parents split up when I was 5, and we stayed with my dad, and I never knew my mom's family at all. Some of my older siblings had met them, but I didn't know them at all. And they live in Oklahoma and Texas, and they're Chickasaw is the Native American tribe that we belong to. But anyway, so I had always heard this as a distant thing. I didn't know these people. I'd never met them. I'd never seen them. And so growing up, I didn't look like my family because I looked more like my mom's side of the family. And, which was fine. It was all good and fine, but it was something kind of in the back of my mind all the time. Like all my cousins and stuff, like they don't look like me, And then when I was 21, my oldest sister had put together this ancestry book, this big book of genealogy. And it was all for my mom's side of the family, these people I had never met. And my mom had 13 siblings, and there was a big family. And I opened the first page of that book and saw people that looked like me and was overwhelmed with emotion. And I could have never said that. You could have asked me 10 times before that, how would that affect you? I'd say, oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be really cool. But it's that familial connection that I was feeling through seeing a picture that I agree with you even more. So I actually just earlier this year, a couple months ago, went to the funeral of one of my uncles on that side who had passed away. And I just felt drawn to go and meet these people for the first time, and being there and seeing them and hearing them. It was incredible. It was like, wow, this is as much a part of me as the other side that I've always known, which I love and care for a ton. But it was just really, and then not to ramble on too long in these stories, but one of our previous episodes is with a minister named Only Love Chica Alston, who's incredible. You should go back and listen to that. But this was before I even knew about the Orphan Myth. This was before I had really given a lot of this much thought, but she talked about in our conversation about how she grew up in the foster care system. In fact, she was taken away from her parents when she shouldn't have been. She was, and grew up in the foster care system, eventually to be taken in by her grandma and stuff. They worked that out, but it was kind of a messy situation. And she had expressed in our conversation that now she does a ton of inner city work with the foster care system to try to make sure that doesn't happen. So I need to reach out to her to get involved with this whole thing. But anyway, she said the same thing because she's African-American. She grew up in New York City, and she went down this journey eventually to where she traveled back to Africa and started doing all of this. She's incredible. She studies the African connection to the Bible. And so it's incredible information. But anyway, so she went back and started this journey, and she was telling me the same thing. We had another interview with somebody who said the same thing, where they went back to where they were, even though it's like hundreds or thousands of years separated, going back and seeing the people and hearing the way they talk and feeling their vibe. You just feel a connection that can't be felt, unless you just really experience it. So again, these are all cases for why family is so important, obviously at the nuclear family and at that level, but also just the connection that you have to people that are yours. Right. It's amazing. Yeah. Give me some of just as far as case studies go, with specific instances with success stories that you've seen, whether it's an orphanage specifically or a kid specifically that you have seen, and the benefits to all of this, right? Because a lot of times we talk about how are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to solve this problem? Let's talk solutions. But what is the other end of that? What kind of case studies have you seen to show the importance of all of this work that the Orphan Myth campaign is doing, that you're doing with the Miracle Foundation and all these other organizations are doing? Oh my gosh. I mean, I could tell you 1,000 of them. Yeah. I could tell you probably a couple thousand of them.
children that have, first of all, when we went on that listening tour in 2016 and we started hearing that the kids, they liked the orphanage, but they would rather be at home. And we're thinking, where's home? Who are you talking about? Oh, you have an aunt. I didn't know you had an aunt. Let's talk to this aunt. So we, girls as young as 6 and boys as young as 8 are part and parcel of this decision-making process. They know very well who they're going to be safe with. They know very well who they like and get along with. And so they are part of this decision-making process. So I'll just give you an example of this young girl named Priya, who her father died when she was 6. Her mother was mentally ill and couldn't take care of her. And so she and her sister went to a girls' orphanage and had a little baby sister that went to the grandmother. And so she and her sister grew up in the orphanage. And it was one of the 300 orphanages we were working with. And we talked to Priya and her sister, and they said they had this grandmother. So we did a home study, went to the grandmother's house, found out the grandmother was a state worker, had a pension, really was raising the other daughter, actually could use some pretty good help because she's 75 now and really could use some help around the house. And, and so we did a home study on them. She needed a roof and she needed some furniture, not a whole lot. And we needed to make sure that we paid for the kids to go to school, and she needed Wi-Fi connectivity. So we provided all that. And she and her sister went home and lived with the grandmother. Then when we went back and did the post-placement reports to start to just make sure that they were okay, I got to actually go. And I said, Priya, how you doing being at home? And just tears just rolled down her face. And she said, Madam, I love being at home. I love having a home. Just the word, you could just tell that word home just meant the world to her. And she loved being with her sister, and she loved taking care of her grandmother, and she loved having to go get water in the village, which is something they didn't have to do in the orphanage. It brought her back to who she was. It was just amazing. And I've just seen that over and over and over with kids that get to go back to their families.
That's incredible. And again, as you look at this and as you humanize this problem again, and the way that others have put it is like, these are right now in this moment, living, breathing heartbeats, that are looking for love and fulfillment and trying to find hope and trying to find optimism. And really, again, as the more conversations I've had, I just see the real potential to make a difference. Not again, some super unlikely, overly optimistic, whatever, look at it, but really, truly, that just getting involved in the small way and if nothing else, being educated and talking about it, the amount of difference that can be made is significant and powerful. Right now, with what is the Miracle Foundation working on at this point, and how can anybody listening that's heard about this and is intrigued can go learn more? And obviously the website's miraclefoundation.org, but how can people get involved and contribute to what you're working on?
Oh, so the best way to contribute to any of these organizations in the Orphan Myth is exactly the same, and that's monthly giving. Coming from the corporate world, when I came to the nonprofit world and I didn't know how to budget, it's very difficult to budget against something you don't even know is going to come in.
Yeah.
And so monthly giving is the most beneficial way to support an organization. If we thought about our health the way we think about our philanthropy, we would all be very sick. A lot of times people think about their philanthropy once a year. Think about your philanthropy once a month. Make a step out and make a difference. You don't want to just make a little bit of difference. You want to make a big difference. You want it to matter. So the other thing you can do is you can figure out what organizations you want to support and do some laser beam giving. Not $100 here, not a scatter plot, not a shotgun approach, but a laser beam approach. Figure out your 10% that you can give away a year. Find 3 or 4 great nonprofits and donate to them every single month. They can budget against the money. They know it's coming in. It becomes their bread and butter, and they'll know exactly how many children they can say yes to. So monthly giving is a powerful, powerful, powerful way to give. That's what you could do for any organization, not just Miracle Foundation. And then the other thing is we have to have a sense of urgency. Like you said, these are living, breathing children. Doing it tomorrow is not good enough. Waiting to the end of the year is not good enough. They need us right now. And I would say, if it was your own child, you would step in. If it was you would step in right now. We have to stop thinking of them as OPCs and make sure we think of them as our children. And what would you do for your child today? You would make an investment in them. And so that's the most powerful way to help.
This is I'm asking you now personal advice as a dad to small kids. So we've got ranging from 6 months up to 9 years old, 4 of them. And one of the things that we're working on constantly is raising kids that have everything they need. They couldn't fathom, the biggest problem is I don't like asparagus. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, they just can't wrap their mind around these bigger problems that the world faces. Do you have any, again, having been around this environment so much, do you have any advice to parents to help broaden their kids' horizons and open their eyes to this stuff, to help them really find gratitude and build kind of that sense of urgency, even as kids, to have this be a part of what they do and who they are?
Yeah. Corey, kids aren't grateful. Kids will never be grateful. They're not designed to be grateful. They don't have the synapses to be grateful. We shouldn't ask them to be grateful. Kids should not have to be grateful. It's fine. It's fine. I mean, they have to be polite, but they don't have to be grateful. And they also, let's give them an opportunity to have a childhood, Yeah. They don't need to understand these problems. Let's hope that we do our job so your children never have to understand these problems. I hope your children never have to understand them. Let's give them an opportunity to have a childhood, not have to worry about it. We take on the thing. So that's what my parents did. My parents never showed me the world. They never showed me the problems. I knew that they were helping with problems. I knew that they tithed every month. I saw them write those checks out. I knew that they were helping. I couldn't put it all together. I didn't really have to. I never really asked to, but they did their part, and I just followed by example. So I do want to I want to just make this a plea to let our kids off the hook. They're not going to get it. We don't want them to get it. It's too hard for us to get. Like you said, you can't unsee that nightmare. I wouldn't want a 9-year-old to know of the nightmare that some of those children are facing. It's not fair. We got this. We can do this as adults. Let's take this off their plate. Let's make sure they never have to get it.
That is incredible perspective. I would never have expected that advice, but I couldn't. I mean, that's powerful. And yeah, the dedication to solving the problem can be seen right there in that statement. Let's not even let them worry about it, and let's have them, when they're 25-year-olds, they're not even thinking about it. It's we've been able to really do some work to solve that problem. I love that. Thank you for that. That's great advice to a parent. Okay, so Orphan Myth specifically here. What do you have anything else to say about the Orphan Myth campaign and this whole initiative, and what can we say more to help people understand what it is and how it works and how they can get involved?
People get it. They know what it is. They aren't orphans. They have families. Let's get them back with their family. Let's make sure that they never have to leave their family in the first place. And if everybody here that was listening would find a nonprofit in the Orphan Myth that they like and they want to support, and just get on it and just start supporting them monthly, that is how we move the needle. That's how you move the needle.
So if you just look up, I think it's orphan_myth on Instagram, I believe. So, and if you just go to the website, orphanmyth.org, then you can go and find all of their social media channels. But that's something that I did a while back when I got involved. I started following it because that's where we spend a lot of our time. People don't necessarily go to websites as much as they do Instagram, right? And then click from there. So what I've learned just in following that, and then the guests that we've had on, as I followed them and seen the amazing work that all of you guys are doing, it's just been very eye-opening. And so I would highly recommend anybody, again, to go to orphanmyth.org, to go sign up with the 100% participation campaign, to get involved. But also, to start following some of these groups, Miracle Foundation or 1 Million Home or Orphan Myth, to follow them on Instagram, because that's where you spend a lot of your time. Don't act like you don't spend a lot of your time there. I know you do. It's been so enlightening to me and thought provoking and action. What's the word? Inducing, I guess, to see this on a regular basis. Yeah. And so that would be my recommendation to everybody listening, to get involved and to be educated and understand and go support this cause. You are amazing. On behalf of everybody that listened to this, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to go back and listen to it and learn even more than the notes that I wrote down while you were talking. Is there anything else that you're working on or that you want people to be aware of, or that we can get the word out on before we wrap up?
No, just, we were talking about in the beginning, we were talking about what my life was like before and what my life is like now. And, in my life before I just had everything that money could buy. And I think we think that that's really the goal, is to have everything that money can buy, but really the goal is to have everything that money can't buy. And that's fulfillment and peace and purpose. And that is what the people that are part of the Orphan Myth are giving the opportunity for people to have a piece of what money can't buy, which is purpose and the ability to make a difference. And so I just want to encourage everybody to get out there and make a difference, because the world has never been more ready for it. And children are waiting. And like I said, if nothing's heavy if everybody lifts.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caroline. Appreciate it. That's a great note to end on.
Hello, it's Corey here, and I just want to thank you so much for listening into the Hope Strategy Podcast. I hope you're enjoying it as much as we are enjoying having these amazing conversations with these incredible individuals talking about hope. We'd love it if you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, and leaving us a review on iTunes or Spotify or anywhere that you listen to your podcasts, and share it with anybody you feel that can benefit from these messages of hope. Thank you so much for listening to the Hope Strategy Podcast.